Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day as we continue to celebrate all the amazing people across the state of Mississippi who are working so hard in the trenches to make this such a great place to live, work, and play. But it's Friday on this show, and it's Saints season. Let's go to my friend Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. And first of all, say good morning. How you doing, Jeff?
Ricky, I'm doing good. Good to hear from you as always. And, we're getting toward the end of the year over here, and it's hard to believe that I can still remember talking to you like before the opener, season opener, and it seems like it was just a couple weeks ago, and here we are getting close to the end of the season.
And man, did we have visions of grandeur. And then we had the first game. Oh my gosh, we're going to the Super Bowl. Second game. Oh my gosh, we're going to the Super Bowl. This is going to be great. We got a new offensive coordinator. He's bringing out the best in this team. Holy mackerel. And then the next game and the next game. And the air went out of the balloon and all the injuries. And still, here we are. Injuries are the name of the game. Alvin Kamara is questionable. And we may not see Derek Carr for the rest of the season. I mean, it's just been one of those seasons, hasn't it, my friend?
Yeah, it's kind of a lost year. When you go into a game, I mean, think about it this way, Ricky. If Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, Taysom Hill, Chris Olave, and Rashid Shaheed don't play, that's probably your five best offensive playmakers. No team can overcome that. So I don't think I've ever seen it where it's that concentrated on playmaking players. Just impossible to overcome, especially when you're playing like a really good team like the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, it's been so disappointing. It really has. Going back to last week's game, they played kind of okay, and then Jay Kaner had a really poor game. I mean, you have a lot more confidence in him than he played. Spencer Rattler came in. There's been a lot of buzz about him, but I didn't necessarily think he played that great. I mean, he certainly played better than Haener, but. What are we learning about this team that we can carry over into next year?
Well, I think it's a testament to Darren Rizzi that the team didn't quit. I mean, they were down 17-0 early in the second half to a team that had to win, a playoff team. They had a lot of fans in the Superdome, man. Washington brought it. That lower bowl was filled with Commanders fans. So it would have been easy to quit, right? I mean, where are you going? The team's pretty much eliminated from playoff contention. So to see them kind of rally back, I think says a lot about, how Darren Rizzi's kind of got this team responding to his coaching. And look, they almost pulled it off. I mean, there was a point in the fourth quarter where I told my colleagues they're going to win because Washington was really, they were just squandering opportunity after opportunity. When you do that at the NFL level, usually it bites you, and it almost did. They were very lucky to win that game, in my opinion. I was not that impressed with Washington after the game. I don't think they're going to be much of a threat in the playoffs. I think they've kind of overachieved to be where they're at. So I came away from that game. If you're a Saints fan looking for optimism, there's some young players that are flashing. Kendre Miller, Spencer Rattler, Brian Brzee coming along. So we're seeing some of the young players finally start to emerge. So, a new core is slowly but surely kind of emerging.
And that helps with salary cap. I mean, you know it, and I know it. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've got a lot of dollars bound up in some older players that we probably will have to say goodbye to, and younger players don't cost as much. And that's kind of the reality of the game, isn't it?
Yeah, and especially, the Saints coming off of that Drew Brees era where you had a lot of money tied up in some veteran players. The transition, you have to hit on your draft picks. When I was out in Denver this August, Sean Payton talked about that because he mentioned how they were walking away from Russell Wilson. We're going to have this huge cap hit, $53 million cap hit on one player. And he said, so we have to hit on this draft. It was all incumbent upon them to have good young players to build around, and they did. It's worked out for them, and I think the Saints are in that same position right now.
So what is the injury situation? It was disappointing to see Alvin, after having such a great year, get injured. And, of course, we know that Derek Carr, big question marks around him. What's the latest? What you hearing?
Well, here's the thing. I think both those guys, if the Saints were in the playoff chase, would play. I think in this situation, what's the point? I mean, they're pretty much eliminated. I think the only way the Saints could even win is if everybody else loses all their games and the Saints win all theirs. It's just so unlikely. For all intents and purposes, the season's over as far as postseason. So what's the point in risking maybe a more serious injury at this point? I think Derek Carr could probably play with that non-throwing hand injury if they were, really needed him to. But I think at this point, you just want to start evaluating for 2025, start seeing what, you have in young players like Kendre Miller and Spencer Rattler. And then you have a better sense when you go into the offseason what your depth looks like and what the more reps these young players get, the better they're going to be in the future. So I would think this team's just being really conservative right now with some of these injuries.
It's been interesting watching the defensive line. Since Rizzi came in, they're doing some things that are different. Cam Jordan, after I would say not playing much, really considering what he normally played, and not playing particularly well, has kind of been, as you guys said in your headline, it re-energized. That's been good to see. But Cam, this may be Cam's last year, maybe, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of a pickle for the team. They're in such salary cap. They've restructured these deals, Ricky. One of the problems the organization's got is how they handle the cap. In my opinion, it's really caused a lot of problems. And so this is a good example, whereas Cam Jordan, unless he retires, which I think is a possibility, they're going to owe him $11 million next year. Now, he's made a lot of money in his career, but $11 million is $11 million, and he is owed that. So the only way he doesn't get it is if he retires. And I don't sense he wants to retire. I mean, when I talked to him after the game, I mean, he was as salty as he ever is. He feels like he's re-energized. And I think a lot of this is due to the coaching change. They just were not responding to Todd Grantham. Todd Grantham is a very well-respected defensive coordinator in the college ranks. He's coached in the NFL before, but it just wasn't working here. I don't know. The message was stale, whatever it was. And they basically fired him. They fired him without firing him and promoted Brian Young. And we've seen a totally different defensive line since that change has occurred. And I think we're seeing kind of what we all thought would happen earlier in the season. They've changed up some of the rush packages. The rotation's a little different. And guys are responding. Now, we'll see if that carries over. I thought Jaden Daniels kind of scrambled into some sacks the other day, showed his inexperience. I mean, he had some clean pockets. If he just sits there, instead he moved into the pressure. That inexperience showed in that second half. Washington was just really out of sorts in that game. So we'll see how it goes going forward. This is a big test coming up with Jordan Love and Green Bay. Green Bay can run the ball much better than Washington. It's going to be a challenge playing in that cold weather. It's probably going to be down in the teens or the low 20s. It's going to be tough just about in every intangible way because Green Bay needs to win. It's amazing. They're 10-4, I think it is right now, and they're in third place in their division. That's how stacked that division. If they were in the NFC South, they'd be running away with it.
So that part is actually quite amazing. So coming back to the defensive line, Chase Young has had some better games. 1-year deal. He's hoping to make this the money year. What's the future look like for him?
Well, I think the Saints will probably show some interest in him. It just depends what his market's going to be. He's played a little better, made a few more plays. He's still kind of got the rap of, taking plays off here and there. And he gets a lot of pressures, but he doesn't get home. He's gotten home a few more times recently. But, I think it's going to be interesting to see what his market is. There's always going to be a market for edge rushers in this league. It's a premium position. So even though he's not an elite guy, he's a guy that I'm sure is going to have teams interested in him because it's such a hard position to fill. You really need three really good ones the way the game's played these days. And if the Saints were to lose him to the market, and if Cam Jordan were to retire, then that immediately becomes a top priority, I think, in this draft. But we got a long way to go before that.
Yeah, it would. Thinking of Jaden Daniels, I think a couple of the plays where he might have moved a little bit too quickly. Chase Young was coming down, and I mean, he is a bulk of a man. I mean, you look at some of the replays of his rushes when he's bull rushing the way that he's expected to. Again, he doesn't do it every play. Man, he's a huge dude.
Well, he's a rare combination of like size and athleticism. You just don't see very many guys that big that can move with the agility he does. And he really gave a lot of problems to the Commanders' left tackle. He's a young guy, a rookie third-round draft pick. He got a little bit of an education in power rushing, because when Chase Young, when he plays with that kind of intensity, and he's been playing much harder the last few weeks. I think he's probably playing for a contract, to be honest with you. He's putting that on film, and he's probably going to get some definite interest because of the way he's playing right now.
Well, we shall see. We shall see. Hey, we're at the end of the segment. When we come back, you wrote actually a terrific column about some great touchdown celebrations. The NFL Saints are NFL leaders as it relates to that. We'll talk a little bit about that, and what you think the rest of the season holds for the Saints. We'll see you after this with Jeff Duncan. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We have Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune, and we're talking about the Saints. I noticed it said NOLA.com, the Datitude had what looked like sort of a front page of the paper, and it had Saints at Green Bay. Encore. Saints, Spencer Rattler look to build off solid performance. Encore. It seems like that's a little too hypey.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, he played well. The thing I liked best about what I saw from Rattler was he's more decisive. Wasn't holding the ball as long. The ball came out quick. He handled pressure a lot better than we've seen before. I mean, they came after him a few times and lit him up. Matter of fact, got 2 personal foul calls against him for hitting him late. I thought they were both kind of questionable, but he played with some poise and managed that 2-minute drill really well for a young player. So there's some things to build on there in that game. But you know how it is, Ricky. I mean, Marquez Valdez-Scantling dropped a ball that Haener threw that was right on his hands, and he made an incredible catch on the one that Rattler threw. Like, if you flip those, the narrative might change, or if Frankie Louvu catches the interception, it was right in his hands that Rattler threw right to him, and he dropped it. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's easy to get carried away one way or the other. I think we need to see a little more body of work there, because it was definitely progress, but it was one half of football.
Would it be, I know you guys have raised this question, but would it be the right thing to just not push so hard to win the last few games so the Saints can improve their top 10 picking opportunity? Well, I mean, Darren Rizzi's not going to do that, right? He's trying to become the permanent head coach. So, I mean, he's the head coach. He's definitely going to push to win. And then you have to remember, there's guys on this team like, proud veterans like DeMario Davis, Cam Jordan, Tyrann Mathieu. I'm assuming that they're going to want to play again next year. That they'll make that decision in the offseason. But they're going to want to keep winning. They have pride. So I don't think that would ever be a thought inside the building. Now, it might be something in a front office somewhere, but it's certainly not going to happen with the men on the sidelines competing in the game. Yeah. Hey, listen, just real quick, because of the access you have with the players, I was wondering, have you had an opportunity to actually chat with Derek Carr recently? No, I saw him. I just said hi to him on the sidelines before the game on Sunday, but he was deeply involved in a conversation with Gail Benson. I didn't want to interrupt, but no, I've not talked to him. Matter of fact, no, I don't think anybody has. I would imagine, though, Ricky, he's going to want to come back next week. They play the Raiders. That's his old team. He's going to be personally motivated to play in that game, I would think. And then it's going to come down to a decision as what's the organization do. But like I said, Darren Rizzi knows he gives them the best chance to win. So I would imagine if he's good to go, he's going to be out there. And he's had a good year. Come on, man. I mean, Derek Carr has had a great year. Now, I would say great year, but he's had a good year. Maybe even a great year when you consider the injuries. I think he's certainly better than what some of the fans feel about him. I don't quite understand that. There's a segment of the fan base that, for whatever reasons, just turned on him.
Maybe because he's not Drew Brees. I mean, there's not going to be another Drew Brees. I think what they're paying Derek Carr and what they're getting certainly is probably commensurate in compensation. I mean, just look what's going on in Atlanta. I mean, they went out and paid Kirk Cousins more than what Derek Carr's getting, and he's already been benched. So it's hard to find these guys. It's hard to find quarterbacks in this league, and I think he's been kind of exactly what I expected. Not great, but certainly solid. And there's a lot worse situations in the league than having Derek Carr your starter.
There's no doubt about that. And then also, I was wondering if you've had the opportunity to chat with Chris Olave.
No, he hasn't really been around. He comes out to practice, but in the locker room, just have not seen him at all. So, and that's a big question. I mean, we asked Darren Rizzi about it. I think he's still getting further tests. And I think the other guy that no one really talked about at all is, Ryan Ramczyk, who's been on IR all year. I mean, we're getting ready to go back up to Wisconsin. That's where he lives. I'm expecting at some point that he's going to announce he's retiring. We saw him at a game earlier this year, a home game, and he looked like he dropped 60 pounds. I mean, he didn't look like the same guy. I can't imagine he would do that if he planned on playing football.
Yeah, you've been expecting that the whole time.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, I think everybody has. And that's a guy that, that 2017 draft class, Ricky, down to one guy now, Alvin Kamara. I mean, now that Marshawn Lattimore's been traded, Ryan Ramczyk retired. I wrote a column back in, I think, February saying this could be the last hurrah for that 2017 class. And it's pretty much the last of the Mohicans with Alvin.
Speaking of Marshawn Lattimore, how weird it must have been for him to come back to the Superdome. Did you get a chance to watch him before and after the game?
I just saw him warming up. A lot of teammates after the game coming up to him. Obviously, he was, the best cornerback in the history of the franchise. I think it's, undoubted. And that I can see why they went and got him. I mean, their secondary is very vulnerable. And the Saints wisely just went after the other corner and that safety time after time. They picked on them. They're going to have issues because that's what everyone's going to do against them. They're very vulnerable on the back end. If their pass rush doesn't get home, those guys just can't cover. I mean, that long ball to Marquez Valdez-Scantling is a good example. Those two guys were right in position, and neither one of them even got their hands on the ball. So I think it makes sense to go get him if they're going to try and make a playoff push.
And then lastly, before we shift gears to the column you wrote about celebrations, Darren Rizzi, any buzz at all about the possibilities he will be the head coach next year?
No, it's way too early. I think here's what I would say about Rizzi. I think he's been impressive in his interim role. I think he's earned the right to be considered as the permanent head coach. But this is too big a decision, Ricky, to just, I think, anoint him the next head coach. I mean, we've seen time and time again historically where teams get a bump, an emotional run. Happened last year with the Raiders, and it hadn't played out well for Antonio Pierce. He's already coaching for his job this year. That's happened more often than not with interim head coaches. And I'm not saying it should happen with Darren Rizzi, that he's not good enough, but I just think it's a huge decision for the organization, and they need to, cover every base. They need to interview every prospect inside the NFL, outside the NFL. I look at the college ranks, top assistants. You've got to get the right leader in here because this organization has struggled now 4 years in a row, missing the playoffs. They need, in my opinion, an alpha leader that has a presence. That might be Rizzi at the end of the process. Maybe that's your guy, but you got to go through the process.
Yeah, it is. It is going to be very interesting to see how that goes. And I agree with you, man. I think they're going to cover the waterfront, and we need a type A personality. I don't think we need a type B guy again. That doesn't play well in New Orleans. What's your thoughts on that? Yeah,
no, they've been successful when they've had that Sean Payton, Jim Mora type of head coach. The problem they've got, I think, is the job is not one of the more attractive jobs in the league because of the cap situation we talked about earlier. It's still a mess. I mean, it's a big mess going forward. You don't have a real long-term quarterback solution. So are they going to be in the market for Ben Johnson, who's going to be the hottest, assistant coach in the league? Are they going to be in the market for a Mike Vrabel or something? Probably not. I mean, maybe so. Maybe if they pay them enough, if they're willing to do that. But I think also right now with the way the Pelicans are going, that's another factor there. I mean, they may be making wholesale changes. Is the organization prepared to turn over both front offices and coaching staffs in the same offseason? Man, that's a lot of money that's going to come out. So I think all those factors are going to play into this, and it leads me to believe historically they're going to go with a young up-and-coming assistant that's not going to cost as much and is going to be really excited about trying to get their first NFL head coaching job. That seems to be more of the profile that's going to fit here in New Orleans.
Well, it's going to be fun to watch. I'm ready to be winning again. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you can do it. You can turn it around. We saw what happened with Washington, Jaden Daniels. But I think it's going to take a little while because this roster's old and the salary cap is a mess. It
is a mess for sure. Hey, listen, you wrote a great piece about historic celebrations. Saints are, I mean, it's interesting because when you went through it, I mean, number 5 was Kamara's Snow Angel. I mean, Kamara's Snow Angel. When you go down the list, you nailed it. What was the process you went through to define that?
Well, I talked to the Saints, PR staff, they've actually done a bunch of videos on the top celebrations ever. They put it together. So I was able to kind of go through that. And the more I looked at it, I'm like, man, the Saints have had some of the most famous touchdown celebrations ever when you really think about it. It was hard for me to pick between Joe Horn's cell phone that, everyone remembers that back in the early 2000s, and then the Jimmy Graham dunk, which he did for 4 years before he hung on the crossbar in Atlanta. Yeah. And I was at that game and caused the Jimmy Graham rule. But when you think about all these touchdown celebrations that are so memorable, I mean, the Saints have had a lot of creative, colorful players.
Cars, MJ, Michael Jackson tribute was a lot of fun. But people should go, if you want to see them and read about it, go to NOLA.com and see Jeff's piece about Saints sort of historic celebrations. They're really good, and it will remind you that we've had some good ones, and I hope that we have some great ones going forward. That makes the game a lot of fun. Listen, it's been a pleasure to spend some time with you, my friend.
All right, Ricky, we'll talk next week, buddy.
You bet. This has been Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. When we come back, JT Mitchell from SuperTalk Mississippi News will be joining me. We'll see you after this.